What is going on YouTube? This is Acid Roots. So I'm going to review the fourth album by rapper Scarface. Basically, this project is called The Untouchable, and it came out in the winter of 1997. So the thing about this particular project is just the fact that Scarface put this project out 3 years after his hit album from 1994, The Diary. But by that point, three rap greats had passed on by that particular point. So the three ones were Eazy-E, Tupac. The three rap greats that had passed on were Eazy-E, Tupac, and Biggie, who passed just basically days before this album particularly came out. I'd have to suppose in particular. But the thing about this particular product is just the fact that Scarface managed to secure one of the last Tupac songs that he recorded in his lifetime. Basically, this album, The Untouchable, was recorded between like the spring, summer of 1996 to about early 1997. This is Scarface's biggest album, I'd have to say in particular. And I saw on like a hip hop website back in the day, probably years before, it basically said that Scarface had recorded a number of songs with Tupac. There were more of them that were kind of recorded back in those days, but Scarface chose not to release them out of respect for Tupac and bitches like that. Just kind of unfortunate. Maybe one day they'll resurface something like that, but there are more floating around songs with Tupac and Scarface at that same particular, which is a pretty dope concept. Gonna get that. But basically, Smile was a smash hit, one of the bigger songs out of the late 90s. I'd have to say in particular, real golden type hit here. Just did a lot of damage pitches like that. It was Tupac in a shining pitch as far as a particular kind of went. Very haunting song, Scarface in his typical fashion. On top of that, Scarface just with like some thrills just about that. Just a real Apple type song, basically one of Scarface's biggest songs to this day. I'd have to say this is a great one. This particular album went platinum. I'm not sure how many Scarface albums went platinum, but this is basically, I want to say, like his highest selling album. I'd have to say in particular. And this is a pretty good pitch here just because this retains some of Scarface's usual hauntingness with like a different amalgamation of like worship and pitches like that. There's some great concepts to kind of get here as far as that would kind of go. Just the aspect, if you like some of the haunting type flair, this one is not quite as full blown haunting as The Diary, but it definitely has some of that grimness. The productions are just more refined. This definitely has a lot of emphasis compared to the stuff that G Funk was doing in like the mid 90s, just within that pitch, has some leftover. This is a pretty West Coast thematic type project. It's less Southern fried and a lot more West Coast fried. I'd have to say you'll find the Ice Cube's on here, Too Short's on here, a Dr. Dre beat and a Dr. Dre verse or two is on here. Roger Troutman is on here, Tupac is on here, so it's just some good pitches to kind of get that particular. This almost damn near feels like a West Coast album. I just would have to say it was a good concept just because this is a very sonically pleasing album. I'd say almost every production on this particular album is a classic in some particular pitch. It's very haunted, has that grimness about it. It's just kind of a combination of like G Funk, the sort of stuff that Brother Lynch Hung was doing once again, just without like the horrorcore type lyrics as far as that particular kind of goes. But Scarface is a pretty haunting individual, so it's definitely a pretty good thrill to get some of this on here, I'd have to say. But this is like a more refined, like basically if you had complaints about The Diary saying that that was a little bit too stark of productions and minimalist, I'd have to say it's like a more glossarized version of that. I'd have to suppose in particular, just the concepts of productions are just a little bit more emphatic. I do feel like the fix is definitely more glossarized compared to this one, but definitely out of the 90s Scarface, this is probably one of the more refined ones to kind of get. This is definitely a classic album here. It has a lot of good pitches about it. There's some thrilling type stuff to kind of get here. Got the third single, which is not something that Scarface typically always kind of does as far as that pitch will kind of happen. So it's just a lot of good concepts just about this particular one. Has the haunting shrillness of The Diary and earlier Scarface albums, and even the Ghetto Boys type stuff, I would have to say, just combined with some of that grim kind of G-Funk type sound of this pitch, just like that. So it's some good concepts. But yeah, basically there were three singles. These did not chart as heavily as like Smile did, but basically Smile with Tupac and Johnny P, which was another nice touch, was to get Johnny P on here just because he had some marvelous hooks. He was pretty known for that with songs he did with Twista and Do or Die and some of those type folks that I have to say. It's interesting that Tupac at least met Johnny J. That would have been great to have gotten more songs with them, I'd have to suppose. But yeah, Smile was a top 15 single on the Billboard 100, so this continues to be, like I was saying, one of Scarface's highest charting songs. Mary Jane was a pretty nice one. That's a real nice one as well. And then Game Over was like the third single that kind of did, I want to say, at least somewhat well in like the rap charts only, but it's just all three of these singles are pretty excellent. So basically, to talk about Smile, this is like a haunting. The first single, Smile, is like a haunting and kind of shrouded classic 90s single. It has, suppose, in particular, real nice one. Tupac completely shreds this song. It's real emphatic. He almost has show stealing, just the pitch, just all the emphasis of how big he was in 1996 just to get this leftover song is pretty awesome. Scarface delivers pretty damn well in this song. Also, he has his typical haunting fashion, just overall ghastliness. That this is just a real grim type one. I remember the music video being pretty haunting as well. It's like a ghastly kind of work shift haze of a song. So that I didn't catch that as much back in the day, but this is kind of like a work shift kind of song. This is a great song to kind of listen to late September, October, as the leaves are starting to turn colors, pitches like that, as the weather's starting to get cooler. Just some real good winter and autumn type weather just for work shift type malaise. It's a real nice one just for evening strolls and pitches like that, or evening commerce, just car traverse pitches like that. I'd have to say just some great concepts to kind of listen to just on the car ride home or just going to work, some of those type pitches. Great autumn music. The thing about Scarface is he would do makeshift type music more so than other rappers back in the 90s. Even it's just a great concept to kind of get this in particular. This was a smash hit, great hook by Johnny P and Tupac and some of those type folks. Just overall, just a great emphatic type song that has a lot of delivery and just overall appeal. Real catchy overall song that continues to be a large one. Really happens to be a thing. Mary Jane is the second single. This is another really emphatic one. This like a looming, kind of desolate, refined 90s creepiness, I would have to say, of a song. Definitely. It's like a great Dracula-like composure the song particularly kind of has. And this is like a superb smoking song, I'd have to say. So this one just really has a lot of emphasis. This is a great song to listen to when smoking up. Pitches like that, I'd have to say. It's a real excellent concept to get some of this particular haze here. This one could almost, I don't feel like this one's as much of like a work shift type song compared to Smile, but this definitely has like the concept of just being able to say some stuff as far as just getting that particular emphasis of just some more haunting type fare. So all three of the singles here are pretty autumn related. This is just, despite the fact that this came out in the winter, this is great for like cooler weather and stuff like that, just like the Diary was as far as that particular kind of goes. Some real good composure on these particular songs. I do like that particular concept. I do think Game Over is a little bit more of an edgy type song, but Mary Jane definitely has some of that crisp composure that just works extremely well, I'd have to say. So that's a nice one. Real beautiful production on that song. Game Over, the third single, is a pretty star-studded appeal. This one has Ice Cube, Dr. Dre, and Too Short on there in addition to Scarface, which is a pretty dope concept. This is produced by Dr. Dre on top of that, so this is a real emphatic type one. This is like a grim kind of horrorcore similar hit with like old western tinge about it. And by old western, I mean like, Wyatt Earp and like, John Wayne, some of that type of stuff, that relative feel from like the 1800s, I suppose in particular. This really feels like, or something that like James Bond kind of had with that, I forget what that sort of guitar or whatever that type of, this kind of reminds me of old western movies and like the James Bond themes and pitches like that, I just would have to say. But it's a great concept, kind of get that. This has an old western tinge, I'd have to say, and this has some West Coast giants on there, I would have to say, in particular. And this the West Coast giants definitely deliver on this particular song, I'd have to say, and this is just like a creeping kind of hit. So it's a pretty nice one. It's interesting to get Scarface to team up with Dr. Dre on here. It's pretty good pitch to kind of get that in particular, just because Dr. Dre was kind of reeling from some of his bombs that he had in like the 90s. He kind of wasn't doing as dominantly as he was like in the early 90s and mid 90s as far as that pitch kind of went. The early Aftermath years with like Dr. Dre Presents the Aftermath and like The Firm and some of that touch stuff, he was kind of reeling from some of those. They weren't flops entirely, but they were just kind of more acquired taste, I'd have to say. But Dr. Dre did deliver a pretty excellent beat on here and some good verses that kind of complement the haunting sounds. So it's a great concept. They definitely should do more songs. That's kind of the thing. So basically, I would have to say there's 12 songs on this particular album. There's 12 songs on this particular album, and out of those 12 songs, I wound up recommending 10. So the only two songs I don't recommend on here would just be Sunshine and Your Money or Your Life. So to talk about those songs real quick. Basically, Sunshine just didn't really like the approach. That particular one was just kind of one that was just kind of similar to like the My Homies type vibes. This one's a more typical kind of summer bustling type Scarface that just didn't work as well. This kind of more plotting type production that just didn't really have the emphasis quite as well as this. Probably trying to be a little bit more of like a day commerce type song, but just didn't pull out the vibe nearly as well as it needed to. Some of these more haunting ones or just more simmering type ones just work a lot better. That one was just more standard commerce, didn't appreciate as much. And then Your Money or Your Life was just one I didn't enjoy as much. And then Your Money or Your Life was just kind of a more lackadaisical, kind of just hop and bop type one that just didn't pull off nearly as well as it needed to. So that's kind of the pitch. But this album is going to get a 10 out of 10. Definitely appreciate this product quite a bit. I'd have to say it's another classic for Scarface, up there with The Fix and The Diary and some of those type ones, I'd have to say. Definitely a lot of Scarface albums I tend to give a pretty high score. This one's no exception. But to talk about some of these on here, basically one of the best songs on the album would have to be For Real. This used to be one of my more favorite ones back in the day. Definitely appreciate this one. This is like a boppish kind of out on the town commute of a song, I'd have to say. Just an early autumn kind of crisp golden vibes that this song particularly kind of gives. And this is just like a great Scarface movie sample that this song particularly kind of has. I mean, obviously with the rapper being called Scarface, there would be some Scarface movie references from the early 80s as far as the pitch can go. So there's at least two songs that do that. I want to say that both For Real and Smarts kind of do that. Those are some good pitches, but I do appreciate For Real, just the overall glossarized, just kind of bounce this one. Just a real emphatic kind of G-Funk type tune that works pretty damn well just to kind of get that. But it's just kind of like a golden type song. It really has like a crisp kind of golden type feel about it. Just really autumn pitch towards it. Real nice on the town, real nice hook on their pitches like that. Just great for like cooler weather, I'd have to say. Smarts is a pretty nice one as well. This is a great pairing with For Real, I'd have to say. This is like a dreary kind of workaday makeshift haze of a song. I'd have to say this works well with Smile and For Real, I'd have to suppose in particular. It's like a good day commute of a song, I'd have to suppose. It's like a smoke a joint and finish errands up type tune. This is just a pretty lackadaisical type one. So it's kind of the concept. I mean, Scarface is pretty mellow. He was kind of like that on like The Diary as well, but this one just really has, now that the productions have evolved a bit in like 97 from 94, the concepts of the, it's just a little bit more emphasis on like the mellowness and the overall drear. Some of these is just a better concept to get that. It's just an excellent concept to kind of see. So a lot of this is just drear. There's some songs like that. Like I do feel like For Real is like that. Smarts is like that. I want to say there's at least like another one that's kind of, I feel like Money Makes the World Go Round is somewhat like that. It's a little bit more springtime type music, but it does have some of that drear about it. There's some real good ones for that sort of concept. Another haunting type one on here would be Untouchable. This has a nice Roger Troutman cameo, and Roger Troutman was the cat that did the hook for Tupac's California Love, so it's a pretty good pitch that Scarface snapped him up as well, I'd have to say. It's like an elegant kind of haunting grace of a song, I'd have to suppose, pretty similar to Mary Jane, I would definitely have to say. Same kind of Chris Dracula typeness about it, I'd have to suppose. This has some superb vibes, and this is like a nice Roger Troutman cameo. Like I was saying, this is a pretty leery song. Just being able to say that in particular. It's a real haunting type one. Mary Jane, Untouchable, some of those type ones. There's another one, No Warning, that's pretty haunting just within that relative pitch. So this is a pretty ghastly type album. It's definitely a good composition to get that. Definitely one of the better produced albums out of the South from like the 90s. I'd have to say this. Just the fact that this combines like West Coast vibes with Southern vibes with horrorcore vibes is an excellent concept to kind of get. Real good swirl of that. No Warning's a pretty nice one. It's like a vintage kind of grim Scarface. It's like a vintage kind of grim Scarface, similar to like the Diary days. I'd have to say pretty dope concept. Get that, I'd have to suppose. It's like more typical kind of horror like. It's definitely more typical kind of horror like type sound. I'd have to suppose in particular, and this is just great for some night strolls. I'd have to say. So I definitely appreciate the concepts of some of these. Definitely some gas station bound type music. I'd have to say in particular, just picking up snackage, getting some pizza, some of those type pitches, Swisher, some of those type things. I just would have to say just some real good ghastliness, just some real good ghastliness to kind of go with some residential type fare. I'd have to say in particular some great concepts for that. South Side is a pretty nice one. It's like a malaise kind of day drear of a song. I'd have to say this goes well with Smarts. I would definitely feel like, and this is just a get supplies kind of typical day. This is just a get supplies kind of typical day. I'd have to say in particular, and this is just like a stellar kind of drowsy beat. I'd have to say. So this is more lackadaisical type fare. I'd have to suppose in particular, just the concept of getting some of these, just kind of. I mean, this can almost be summer. I'd have to say in particular, but this really has like the real, this overall bleary type feel that just works pretty well. I'd have to say just the concept behind it, just some good concepts kind of get some of these. Once again, some more of these work shift type ones. I feel like Smarts, Smile, a little bit of For Real, a little bit of South Side, some of those type ones just work pretty well for that. One that's kind of one that sticks out like a sore thumb a bit, but still a pretty good song on here would be Money Makes the World Go Round. This reminds me of like the same titled song from like West Side Connection. I think it was called Money Makes the World Go Round. It's the second single off the Bow Down album from 1996 by Ice Cube and them, I'd have to say. But basically, the song on this particular album is like a balmy kind of springtime type music, I'd have to say in particular. It's got more pep than normal for Scarface, I'd have to say. And this is just a pretty mellow workaday type song, I'd have to say. So it's just a good concept just to get some of that music to listen to in like late March, April, some of those type pitches as the flowers are growing, some of those type pitches, the grass is starting to turn green, some of that type stuff, I'd have to say. It's a real good concept. Get that. Just kind of an offhanded type one. I mean, Scarface, when you think of him, you don't typically think of him in like around Easter time and more like springtime type eras as far as that pitching goes with spring cleaning and some of that type stuff. I'd have to say it was a pretty good concept just seeing what he's up to just within that relative production type fare. It's kind of another balmy type one to kind of get here, but it works pretty well, I'd have to say. And then Faith is another nice one. This is like a creeping kind of autumn decor. Faith is like a creeping kind of autumn decor of a song, I'd have to say in particular. This works great with Untouchable and Mary Jane, I'd have to say in particular. And this is just like a sleepy and ghostly kind of autumn commute of a song, I'd have to say. So some real dope concepts going to get this one. This is a lengthier type song on here, but this really has that relative appeal. This is a typical type haunting one, I'd have to say. Just another good ghastly type one to kind of get on here. There's a lot of good creepy veneers about this particular product that just work pretty damn well. I'd have to say typical Scarface fashion, I'd have to suppose, but there's just a lot of ghastliness that just has real, the hauntiness of this particular album is easy to give some approval, I'd have to say. So it's a dope concept, kind of get that in particular, but I do basically appreciate this album damn near full bound, I'd have to say. So that's the concept about it. So basically, I'm going to give this album recommending 10 songs out of 12 on here. I'm going to give this album like a 10 out of 10. Basically, just minus those two songs, which were just kind of small blunders that just didn't really have the same affability about them. That's the basic concept about it. But the social score, that's kind of tricky. I feel like because of like the popularity of the Tupac song, Tupac and Johnny P, two cats that were in their prime around this time, this is one of Scarface's big Smile is one of Scarface's biggest songs. I definitely think it outstrips like the normal kind of fanfare that Scarface kind of gets. Not to say that Scarface is like a mild kind of artist, but just that to say in particular, I just don't know how much commercial normal fare that he gets. This album definitely has some of his biggest hits. Dr. Dre's on here. He drops a few verses. Ice Cube's on here. Daz Dillinger's on here. Devin the Dude's on here. Roger Troutman's on here. There's some great beats on here. Just some pitches like that. Just haunting appeal. Just the real ghastliness of this particular project. And Scarface doesn't slip in the delivery of some of these songs. I definitely feel like these particular songs just have the execution being nailed. And for a 90s album, this is pretty damn excellent. It's not to say that 90s albums aren't good, but it's just kind of the concept that the composure of this particular one, this definitely should be one that should be talked about more in 90s type fare. I feel like this particular album, both the Diary and the Untouchable are albums that should be recommended with the heap of 90s best, just like with some of those like Doggy Style and The Chronic and Dog Food and some of those type ones, All Eyes on Me, Ready to Die, Life After Death, No Way Out, some of those type ones. It's definitely like a good staple here. Just combines a lot of great sounds and is sonically pleasing pitches like that, very haunting pitches like that. Just delivers, just overall, it's just a very superior type record that just probably gets overlooked in nowadays times. I feel like probably 28 some odd years later, 27 years later, just the pitch behind it. This is just kind of an overlooked project that just needs a lot more appeal than what it's gotten. I definitely think it probably should be more than platinum in today's times, just looking after the concept. But I don't know if I said I was going to give the social score of this album like a 10 out of 10, but I just look after it. I kind of feel like in terms of the quality, there's enough on here. There's definitely some popular type songs to kind of get. I feel like Smile is definitely a nice one. Game Over is a pretty nice one. Untouchable, some of these haunting type ones, some of these day commerce type ones, just gonna have for some makeshift. Just if you're in the whip with your buddies, pitches like that, just having some hotbox smoke sessions, pitches like that, some of those type tunes. Mary Jane's definitely a great smoking song, some of those type fares, just some kind of haunting and just late summer, early fall, crisp kind of golden days type appeal to kind of get some of this. This is great for like the cooler weather. It's definitely some stuff to listen with your buddies as the weather starts to get cooler and the holidays start to approach. I'd have to say, even in like the early months of the year and like the winter side of things, I suppose it's a great concept to kind of have some of that. So yeah, I'll go ahead and give the social score like a 10 out of 10. But in terms of the future, like Scarface is supposedly retired. I mean, he put out a couple albums in 2015 and 2017, so he has at least dropped some recent ones as far as that particularly kind of gotten to. I am going to get to some more Scarface. I have more in the pipeline as far as that particular kind of goes. I realize that he's dropped at least a couple double albums. Those are going to probably take longer to get to, but we will get to some more of these. I do want to get to some of Scarface's early albums, like Mr. Scarface is Back and some of those type ones, and get to other projects by him, like his 2010 mixtape, I'd have to say. But yeah, definitely a classic here, easy enough to see, and this is definitely like a 90s staple.